Hey there YouTube, if you've been following along, you know my last several videos have been about the Ducati TT project, and whereas that's done-ish, I'm going to switch gears and do some more work on the Z900. It was a big decision for me months ago to switch from the KTM 890R to the Z900, and if you been following on Facebook, and I think I mentioned this before, there's actually a KTM 790, 890 Norden 901 camshaft failure Facebook page. And if I understand correctly, I think KTM just acknowledged yesterday that there was a fault in the engine, led to oiling problems, camshaft wear. So there's some sort of goodwill return program that they have set up. But anyway, regardless of that, as much as I love that KTM, I'm kind of glad I got out of it when I did. And the new owner can sort that out. Again, when I sold it, it was absolutely fine, not making any noises, just under 10,000 kilometers. But I'm guiltless when it comes to selling that bike when I did and moving to the Kawasaki, which has been great. Probably close to 4,000 kilometers so far this summer. And it's been a great machine, reliable, quick enough. Those of you who know me and my Facebook page realize I got my first speeding ticket in a number of years. So yeah, it's definitely fast enough, but I want to work on the handling. So this is the first step in addressing this. So this is the nice K-Tech box. K-Tech is a company out of the UK. It's not a full unboxing because I took it out of its little nappy sack there. And I got the Razor R Lite. So this isn't by any means the top of the line shock. As it was, I did get it in Canada. There's always the options of buying these things, in out of the States, or in Canada, or even K-Tech is in the UK, even buying it in Europe and trying to save some money by shipping it. But anyway, this is their baseline model shock, but it has some better adjustability and certainly a better quality shock by all accounts. Guys have been putting these on for a while, and they're well respected. Some compression rebound damping adjuster here, 24 clicks I think, and then you can also adjust it for length. So again, this isn't rocket science, but just sort of sussing out the shock and how it's mounted and that sort of thing. There might be some tricky bits in getting it done. So I'll do a Razor R or shock replacement video today, and I've also got some other wee little bits I might include in this. So this is going to be full Z900 content. So those of you who started to subscribe because I bought the Z900, your wait is over. So that's what it looks like, brand new out of the box. And here's the bike ready to go. So a couple of things I've learned over the years is that if you if your bike is configured the right way, you should look at either buying or getting some of these peg stands. So these are ones that I made, and so the idea is that you build them around the idea of just taking some weight off the rear swing arm. Of course, you can't take out the shock because there's weight on the rear wheel and the rear swing arm, so that needs to be lifted up and some weight taken off it. Some guys have put like a hydraulic jack underneath the catalytic converter, or underneath the engine, or try to avoid the pipe or whatever, but this has a big catalytic converter on it, and so I probably could, but I want to avoid putting any extra stress on this. So the plan is that this gets lifted up with the rear wheel stand, and then you slide these over the foot pegs because they're solid mount, and it holds the rear of the bike up. If you don't have aftermarket foot pegs with solid mount pegs, if you don't have these, you're going to have to figure out a different way of doing it. Another method I've seen is lifting the bike up with straps underneath a ladder, just sort of oriented over the back end. I actually did that to take the shock out of the 848 just because of how that bike's configured, and it actually works. But the key lesson I've learned, luckily not the hard way, but someone, kind of gave me some advice before I started tearing into a bike, is that when you start reefing on bolts, like shock bolts, which are going to be very tight, don't do it while the bike's on the lift. It makes no sense to do that. Like, loosen these off. Don't take them out, of course, because the whole thing will collapse. But, loosen them off, then put it up on the lift, then replace your component, unless it puts undue stress on the part. Snug it and torque it back up, and then let it down. The tricky bit here, you will see, is that the top end of the shock mount is kind of buried underneath the frame, and the ABS unit is kind of in the way on that side. And don't get me started about ABS units. But anyway, I'll get started in this, and if any insights come other than just brute force and twisting your hands inside a motorcycle frame, I'll be sure to let you know. So check back in a second. So these are the funny little things that happen when you add aftermarket parts onto a bike. Things don't crop up immediately, but they do eventually. So in order to get a good 14 millimeter socket on the head of that bolt there, I've got a wrench. Just, you can kind of see it there on the nut there. I said, I need to take this guard off. Well, I've removed it. There's two little bolts and some press fittings, but I can't take it off because the design of this aftermarket rear set is such that I can't actually remove it the way I want to. So I'll just leave it there hanging down. And of course, it's you're not working on a bike unless you start bleeding. Those of you who like to wear mechanics gloves are probably shaking their head right now. So anyway, this is the bike on the stand. So these little homemade stands, not my best welding. In my defense, this was my first project with a MIG welder. I'm a better acetylene welder than I am a MIG welder. So please don't look at that. That's terrible. But as you can see, here's I acetylene welded this, and it's much better. So this is now propped up on the foot pegs here, the solid mount foot pegs. So the pressure is taken off that wheel, so I should be able to remove the shock fairly easily. I always leave these underneath though, just in case. Not that this is necessarily going to help. If this fails, that wheel is going to drive itself right up into the license plate and that sort of thing, but there's just a little bit of reassurance there when I do something like that. So anyway, I will remove the stock shock and get the aftermarket one ready to fit. So that was fairly straightforward, taking a little bit of weight off the rear wheel, and the bolts come out. There is some talk about needing to replace these nuts, but they are metal lock nuts, so maybe they're an upgrade from some of the earlier ones, but those are good quality nuts. Like, they're even better than nylon lock nuts. So I'm satisfied with these, that I can reuse those, maybe with a little dab of Loctite. I'm going to need to phone the ambulance at this rate, because I've been working on this for a few minutes, and I've now sliced my finger open on a jagged edge of this preload collar. I think this one right there, because you go to set the preload and add a bit more, because the rear end has way too much sag stock. And I've tried every C-spanner I had, and none of them would actually work. So I did the old punch method, and of course this isn't the greatest metal in the world, and so it creates some nice little jagged edges. So if I don't die of blood loss, I will, it's a little boo-boo, but I will continue with the install. I'll go get the new one here. And when I first looked at this thing, it seemed deceptively long. It still does, but we will compare it. And of course, it is the same length. So I think what caused me to consider that, of course, is that the spring is shorter in length, it's narrower in diameter, and it's got way more preload here, and you can see there's considerable stroke here in this, and that has to do with how the linkage is set up and a bunch of mechanical things that I obviously don't understand. So I will set about putting this back in. And then she's done. I gotta admit, compared to shock removal on the Ducati 848, this is amazingly simple. It certainly helps to have the right tools in this case. Just these peg stands are pretty helpful, but this probably took 10 to 12 minutes all told. And again, you know, having the right socket and not having to use, you know, vice grips or crescent wrenches also helps too. But yeah, that is nice and simple. And of course, the quick little bounce up and down on a test, you know, certainly seems it has a lot more controlled movement. The whole idea of it, the original one went, you know, you push it down and it'll go up like this, whereas this is just like that, and it even makes that sound. No, it doesn't. So, like a lot of bikes, the idea around improving the back end is great, but the front is going to need some work too, and I've got plans for that. But that will be a winter plan. So we'll get this we'll get this put back together. I'll take it for some rides for the rest of the summer riding season, and we'll see how it feels. So again, super quick, easy. 14 millimeter box end, 14 millimeter socket, nice little extension here. Take off the two Allen bolts that hold that cover in place, get this thing propped up somehow, and I was able to do it myself. The manual even says find a friend, and I was able to do it all by my lonesome, so look at me. Anyway, we'll move on to some of the work on the other sides of the bike. So my apologies to the I guess engineers, usually in Western countries, who develop and design parts only to have them blatantly ripped off by usually Chinese companies and sold for a fraction of the price. So again, those of you in the know that there's a company I think called Race Torques who build shift shaft supports, and you know, build in aluminum. You know, and accurately machined. You can see the nice little machining marks on these things, and it supports the shift shaft on certain bikes, especially if the shaft itself sits pretty proud of the case. And I'm not sure how well you're going to see this, but this is the shift shaft on the Z900, and you see it's got a pretty long bit of shaft there extending out of the case, which could possibly benefit from some additional support, which is what this thing is going to do. So again, fairly straightforward installation. I do need to take off the knuckle here, obviously, and remove this cover here, I think, to give me a bit more access to the place where it mounts behind. So there's the piece itself, and I'll put another dab of grease on the inside of that bearing, although it's not a high-speed bearing by any means. And then two of these M6 Allen bolts, and there looks to be a bit of a spacer behind one of them because it probably sits proud of one piece of the case. Just a little, again, tidbit or hint that I've learned over the years is that where this seam here is, just make a little mark with either a paint pen or a Sharpie, so when you put it all back together, you know exactly where that thing mounts, so that your gear lever is where you want it to be. Just a little interesting bit here. I'm going to take a look. So again, this is why, depending on the design of your rear sets, going back to installing the shock, you don't want to put a whole lot of pressure on these bolts as you tighten them, because this little peg, which is only an M8 Allen bolt, is carrying the weight of the entire machine, and this isn't a light bike by any means. So there's only one M8 bolt holding it there, and then an M8 bolt holding on the peg itself. So a lot of pressure on that thing, and I don't know if it moved slightly. It might have. Again, these are Chinese rip-off rear sets, and those of you out there will probably say, well, if you bought the real Light Tech rear sets for 3 times the price, that wouldn't happen. But anyway, just something to keep an eye on when you're jacking up your bike and making sure you're not putting too much pressure on things. So anyway, I'll get at that shift knuckle support, and we'll install this little shift shaft support bracket. So just a quick point of clarification, this cover does not necessarily need to come off, but it does give you an opportunity to take it off, clean the inside. There was a bunch of chain gunk in there and that sort of thing, even only after a few thousand kilometers. So the kit comes with two longer bolts here, so you remove the two shorter lower ones, and then this fits in and slides over like that. As you can see, I've put a big dollop of additional grease in there to make sure it's well lubricated. It just slides over the shaft and goes on there. So just as a point, FYI, you do not need to take the cover off, but you might as well clean out the inside of it. And so here's the piece mounted. I gotta admit, it's very well built. Obviously it's billet, but it's got a nice little dust seal around the outer edge of that, and it's just as the taper starts to come out. So I think it'll be well supported. Put a little bit of blue Loctite on these. The spacer that comes with it goes underneath this one, and when you get your kit, you'll see how that works. So the last bit is to mount the knuckle here and make sure I can actually shift gears. So stay tuned. Well, as advertised, that works as it should. Nice smooth operation. This is snugged up here, and I put that little mark there, as I mentioned, to know where the knuckle actually goes on the end of the shift shaft, and the good old Kawasaki positive and neutral finder. That's first gear, and then that's back to neutral, but it's nice and smooth, nothing's fouling on anything, and yeah, that works as advertised. And again, I know there was a company in the UK that did all the engineering work around this, and then someone from China probably stole the design or even stole the idea. This was, I think, under 20 bucks from Amazon, but I guess that's the reality of the economy now. So I feel a bit guilty, but I've certainly paid through the nose through other parts as well. So anyway, moral crisis over. We'll move on to the last piece that I'm going to add on to this bike, and another one of those preventative, like this I see as a preventative piece to make sure that shift remains positive and nothing gets damaged. The last piece is also a preventative piece, so we'll move to that next. So if I felt guilty about using a Chinese knockoff Amazon part on the shift shaft support, I've sort of compensated for that by buying the real deal, an R&G radiator guard / oil cooler guard. I've been a big fan of these, or doing this modification or addition to a bike. Again, one of those formative times, first or second day out on the track at Gimli. It's a racetrack, so it should, in quote, be clean or clear, but we share the track at the time with drag racers, go-kart, open wheelers, Corvette Club, car racing, yada yada yada. So there was always stones on the track, and sure enough, some guy had come, I think it was from somewhere in Saskatchewan, so 8-9 hours drive. He came out to the track. I think it was either a race bike or a track bike. Someone was following a rider, and someone spit up a stone and put a hole through his radiator. So these aren't necessarily absolutely foolproof, but they're a lot better than not having anything at all. So this was a pretty penny, because again, it's a relatively new bike. There's not a whole bunch of dead stock in any store for a 2023 or 2024 Z900. So you can get knockoff ones of these on eBay, again, AliExpress, Amazon, but fitment issues, I didn't want to fight with that, and I know R&G make good stuff. So there's a whole process in mounting these things. I think you can see there's some foam that needs to be cut up and put on the back and that sort of thing. So it's a bit of an involved process, but I'll do that and update the installation. I think it's quite simple on this bike. In fact, I know it's quite simple on this bike. But the first step is to just do a little tidy up of the radiator itself. There's no sense covering up some dead bugs from the last ride. So I'll brush those off with a toothbrush or a nice soft bristle brush and start the assembly of this. So with all R&G guards, you fit some foam strips, sticky back foam strips to the back of the radiator guard, just to keep it from rattling on the radiator itself. 2 bolts here on each side, 10mm bolt, nicely bent here, well engineered. That sort of to me reflects you know, some quality engineering and a difference between this and the one from Taiwan or China. The bolts here at the bottom, though, I'm a bit disappointed in what's been supplied. This is what R&G sent with a kit, and aside from these 4 washers, I'm not going to use these. I think I'll find some dome Allen bolts that I have and some nylon lock nuts versus these acorn nuts. So a bit disappointed in that, but easy enough to address. And it's on. Replaced these with some, I couldn't find any button head Allen bolts. They were all a bit too long, so I found these ones here. They're both matching, which is kind of nice, some lock nuts on the end, and so it's mounted. So that should really help protect the radiator from gravel or any debris that gets kicked up as I'm riding. So yeah, nice, easy, straightforward installs today. You gotta like days like that, because oftentimes when it comes to modifying your bike and that sort of thing, it doesn't always go that smoothly, and you're fighting with things. So yeah, that's it for now for Z900 stuff. I've got one more little cosmetic item that's coming in soon, which I will again do a video of its installation. Check back soon.